My name is David Carter, Speaker of the House and MLA for Calgary-Egmont. Yesterday in question period, one of the important issues raised was the matter of what the government intends to do with regard to French language in the province. After question period today, the House will be resolving itself into Committee of the Whole to deal with a number of bills which are currently at that stage of their development. Hopefully, the House will be rising in the middle of June and no later than the third week of June. Let us pray. We give thanks to God for the rich heritage of this province as found in our people. We pray that native-born Albertans and those who have come from other places may continue to work together to preserve and enlarge the precious heritage called Alberta. Amen.
Introduction of visitors. Presenting petitions. Reading and receiving petitions. Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Notices of motions. Introduction of bills.
Minister of Hospitals.
Request leave to introduce Bill number 31, the Calgary General Hospital Board Amendment Act 1988. Mr. Speaker, this bill is designed to provide an opportunity for the Government of Alberta as well as the City of Calgary to appoint members to the Calgary General Hospital Board for the operation of the Bull Valley site and the Peter Lougheed Centre, which is the new names being proposed for the two hospitals they will be running.
The Honourable Minister of Hospitals and Medical Care has moved first reading of Bill 31, Calgary General Hospital Board Amendment Act 1988. Those in favour of first reading, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. Carried.
Bill number 31, Calgary General Hospital Board Amendment Act 1988, introduced by the Honourable Mr. Moore, is now read a first time.
Old Stidsbury.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce Bill number PR10. This is a Brandon Paul Lumley Limitation Act. It's a bill to enable pursuit of legal action.
The Honourable Member for Old Stidsbury has moved first reading of Bill PR10, Brandon Paul Lumley Limitation Act. Those in favour of first reading, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. Carried.
Bill number PR10, Brandon Paul Lumley Limitation Act, introduced by the Honourable Member Mr. Brassard, is now read a first time. Tabling returns and reports.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to file with the Assembly a document titled Dioxins, Furans and Fish from the Wapiti and Athabasca Rivers, dated May 17, 1988.
Thank you. Honourable Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to table the annual report of Olds College as required by statute.
Thank you.
Introduction of special guests.
Member for Edmonton Highlands.
Mr. Speaker, it was my pleasure earlier this afternoon to meet with 28 grade 5 and 6 students from Virginia Park School out in the hallway in the rotunda and down in my office, and they had some really good questions to ask, and I know we're looking forward to the proceedings this afternoon in the Assembly. They're accompanied today by their teacher, Mr. Gary Huminiuk, and moms, Mrs. Sheila Edgar and Mrs. Margaret Heinzler. They're seated in the public gallery. I'd ask them to rise and receive the warm welcome of all members of the Assembly.
Red Deer South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure at this time to introduce to you and through you to the members of the Legislative Assembly 50 grade 8 students from the Eastview Community School. They are accompanied by their teacher, Kevin Schilling and Ray Tulp, and parents Lorette Brusnick, Caroline Hunter, and Brenda Halford. Mr. Speaker, they are bright and enthusiastic students. And I say that, Mr. Speaker, because I too attended grade 8 and grade 9 at Eastview Community School, and things haven't changed a bit. I would ask them to rise in the members' gallery and receive the warm reception of this Assembly.
Red Deer South again.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also have the pleasure this afternoon of welcoming 39 model students from Mount View Elementary School in Red Deer South. They're accompanied by their teachers, Glenn McLeod and Greg Atkinson, and parents Charles Murray, Hank Sims, and Don McLeod. Somebody asked if I went to that school as well, Mr. Speaker. I used the word model, and no, I didn't go to that school, but my two daughters attend Mount View. I'd ask that they would rise and as well receive the warm reception of this Assembly.
Minister of Culture and Multiculturalism.
Mr. Speaker, there can't be anyone left in Red Deer. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to introduce to you, and through you to the members of the Assembly, representatives of an incredible association. Mr. Speaker, Alberta leads Canada by establishing the Alberta Heritage Day. And here we have representatives today of leaders in Canada. In the Book of Best Festivals, which lists 100 best festivals in North America, Edmonton's Heritage Festival Association, Edmonton's Heritage Day, is 12th in North America. They're here today, Mr. Speaker, in the members' gallery, and I'd ask they would rise as I introduce them. Mr. Alan McLean, President of the Edmonton Heritage Festival Association, Ms. Nina Timperley, Chairman, Mr. Wayne Ellis, First Vice President, Mr. Dennis Fallman, Second Vice President, Mr. Michael Ford, Secretary, Mr. Ralph Melnick, Treasurer. Would the members please give this association's representatives a 12 applause.
Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Mr. Speaker, to the Solicitor General. Mr. Speaker, the last decade has seen a significant rise in the rate of criminal offenses in Alberta, Mr. Speaker. In fact, the incidence of crime is growing about 10% faster than population growth in this province. Alberta was this is 1986, Mr. Speaker, was 11.5% and 14.6% above the national average for incidents of property crime and violent crime, respectively. Mr. Speaker, much of that increase has been concentrated in the inner cities, and I can assure the Minister it's one of the top concerns of the residents in the inner cities. My question to the Solicitor General, will the Solicitor General advise what provincial planning has gone into dealing with this very serious problem?
Mr. Speaker, I question some of the statistics that were used by the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, but I can assure him that everyone in Alberta shares the concern that there is crime existing within our inner cities. There's crime wherever there's a congregation of people. It seems to be a part of human nature. The policing in all of our inner cities are the responsibilities of the police commissions in those particular cities. I can take the Edmonton as an example. The Edmonton Police Commission with the Edmonton Police Department has instigated a program of crime prevention and not only crime prevention, but a way of involving the citizens in fighting crime through neighborhood police units. Inspector Braden of the Edmonton City Police has been a spearhead in this initiative, and relating back to the Sir Robert Peel of the UK, it's shown that the new technology that came with police departments using cars and radios, that we got away from having the officer on beat within a particular city area where they get to know the people and there's a good rapport, and it is indicated that crime prevention is augmented that way, and that's happening now in Edmonton on a test basis and will be expanded to other areas as well.
Mr. Speaker, that's fine. I will come back to that, but that's in spite of the Solicitor General's department. It has nothing to do. It's asking what his department is doing. That's the City of Edmonton. But, Mr. Speaker, when I look at the funding and the cutback policies of this government, I notice that the support for policing is now at its lowest point in 7 years. And that's at the time the crime rate's going up. My question to the Minister: how can the Minister justify cutting back on support for policing at the same time that crime rates have dramatically increased?
Mr. Speaker, I again question the statistics that the Honourable Leader of the Opposition is using. The crime levels have not increased substantially in 1986. They've in fact at a level progression. And as far as the funding that comes from the Solicitor General's Department, we fund on a per capita basis police departments. It decreased in 1986 by 2%. It went up again by 1% last year. But I would like to put that into perspective as well. If you take, again, and I'll just use because we are in the City of Edmonton, the City of Edmonton Police Department has a budget of $78 million. The per capita grant that they receive from us is not a very large significance within their departmental budget. In fact, our decrease affected them less than 1/2%.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's precisely the point that we're making. Surely there must be responsibility from this minister's department dealing with skyrocketing crime increase. And I'll show him my figures if he wants, Mr. Speaker, because they're correct. Now, my question is, the Solicitor General has already talked about the very innovative program based in Edmonton. I think it's an excellent program. But they're having trouble funding, Mr. Speaker. My question to the Solicitor General, it wouldn't cost a lot of money, will the Solicitor General at least agree to assist this program by funding an assessment and review of this initiative to determine its usefulness on a broader basis? We'll at least do that much.
Mr. Speaker, not only do we do at least that much, we do far more than that. We have initiatives for many, many crime prevention programs. I just gave the example of one. The Solicitor General's Department is given the mandate to ensure there's adequate and effective policing within the province. It's delivered under a policing agreement outside of urban areas. In population areas under the present Police Act of over 1,500, those communities develop their own contracts, or in urban areas much larger, have their own municipal police forces. And it is then up to the citizens of that particular community to decide what element they want to have their policing in their community. The City of Edmonton has an exemplary police force, and I don't doubt that people may want more policemen in their particular neighborhoods from time to time. That's where this community policing, neighborhood policing, is combating, because they will have then police where they need them, rather than police driving around in a car in a neighborhood that perhaps does not have a very high crime rate, but it gives everybody a warm feeling.
Mr. Speaker, that's precisely the point that I'm trying to get there. Why doesn't the Solicitor General's Department, saying that this is a good program, provide some funding? He must be aware that the Edmonton Police are canvassing private foundations all over North America. Instead of spending their time doing this, why doesn't he put some money into this program to see if it works and we can bring it in on a broader basis?
Hear, hear.
Mr. Speaker, I won't make the comment. the funding, as I mentioned, and using Edmonton as an example again, there's $78 million for policing. This is an innovative program. We are participating with the Edmonton City Police Department in this innovative program. The research that's done and the development of this type of policing comes from the states and is augmented and initiated through a foundation. And of course they're asking that foundation for funds because they are the ones that developed and are implementing with the Edmonton City Police and with the Solicitor General's Department that innovative initiative.
Supplementary. Second main question. Calgary-Buffalo supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last year I expressed concern to the Solicitor General about the large number of crimes of violence involving the use of knives and suggested that the ALCB rules be passed prohibiting knives in licensed premises where they're being carried openly. I'm wondering whether the Minister can tell us whether he has taken or plans any action with respect to the carrying and possession of knives in licensed premises.
Mr. Speaker, I well remember that question, and I think my response at the time was then we would also have to change the food requirements because nobody would be able to eat. But along that line, I have discussed with the Attorney General many ways that we could maybe cut down on the use of knives, not only in licensed premises but on the streets. And we are trying to develop. But you also then have to have a policing mechanism as to how you check your knife at the door or check whether you are in fact carrying one other than with putting in X-ray equipment.
Thank you. Second main question. Leader of the Opposition.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to designate my second question, the member from Edmonton Millwoods.
Mr. Speaker, my questions today are to the Minister of Advanced Education. Some 3 weeks ago, the Faculty Association of Medicine Hat College got together and took the unusual and unprecedented move of passing a vote of non-confidence in the president of the college, Mr. Chuck Mahar. The meeting yesterday, the college's board called to discuss these matters. They decided, after a great deal of community pressure, to conduct a review of the college and the president. They then, to demonstrate their total inability to deal with such matters, endorsed the president, who has no faculty support for another 5.5 months, and just this morning fired the vice president academic who'd been at the college for some 20 years and had the support of the faculty. And my question to the minister is simply this: how long is he going to let this untenable situation fester before he steps in to salvage what's left of the integrity of Medicine Hat College?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I won't respond to that in detail because I've explained the self-governing principle that's applied to these autonomous colleges before in this House, but I do want to correct one misunderstanding that perhaps the honourable member didn't want to leave with the House, and when he referred to this as an untenable situation. The advice I have is that the Board of Governors responsible for governing the college passed on a 9-to-1 vote, a vote of confidence in the president, and that included the student member on the board and the support staff member on the board, as well as the community citizens at large. The only person casting the negative vote, of course, was the academic faculty member who was present. But the board has undertaken to have an external review done, not only of the office of the president, but of the entire operation of the college as a whole. And in my view, that's a good thing for any institution to do from time to time.
Especially at this time.
So I guess the views of the Faculty Association don't count for anything. But let me ask the minister this: even though the president of Medicine Hat College had no experience as an educational administrator before his appointment, and he has now completely lost the support of the faculty of the college, can the minister confirm that the real reason he's refusing to take any action on this matter is simply that not only is Mr. Mahar a loyal Tory, but he was past president of the Medicine Hat PC Association?
That's right. A lot of good strength, good experience. Next supplementary question. I'm not here to do it. Too hard to handle that one, ain't it? Too hard to handle.
The truth hurts, I guess, Mr. Speaker. If you want to answer that question, let me ask him this: will the minister now correct an injustice and direct the Board of Governors of Medicine Hat College to reinstate Mr. Dick as Vice President Academic and thereby clearly indicate to the people of this province that at the public colleges of Alberta, merit, qualifications, and dedication count for more than partisan brown-nosing.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure the honourable member knows, and I don't know why he's trying to indicate otherwise, but he knows that the boards hire their own presidents, that there's a system for doing it. It's interesting that the present Board of Governors of the Medicine Hat College, who apparently are so incompetent, contain among their membership the ND campaign chairman for the last election in Medicine Hat. And the advice I have is that he fully supports the actions taken by his colleagues around the boardroom table.
Mr. Speaker, given all the problems that have been associated with colleges in this province due to the current system of the government appointing board members on a patronage basis from whatever party, will the minister make a commitment today? Will he make a commitment today to the people of Alberta to introduce amendments to the Colleges Act that require board appointees to have some legitimate representational basis for being on the board, and not that they're friends of any party?
No, we have no plans under consideration at the present time to make such a change, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker, the system that is used is not unlike any governing body throughout Alberta. The various municipalities have options under hospital legislation whether to appoint or elect board members, and that's mixed throughout the province. We like to appoint board members to these community educational institutions, and it's worked very well.
Calgary-Buffalo supplementary.
I'm wondering whether the minister will acknowledge that the problem in Medicine Hat and indeed many other colleges is in fact the result of too much political interference in the appointment of members of the board. In this case, appointment of a president who is not only a PC supporter, but who reportedly picks up the Attorney General at the airport when he makes his sojourns to Medicine Hat.
Member, thank you very much. That's nonsense. Such nonsense.
Well, I'm surprised at that last question coming from the honourable member, because I expect more from him. Well, it's not unexpected from other sources.
Put him in the trunk.
Well, he's a constituent of mine. That's why I expect more.
You voted for it.
Mr. Speaker, the system that's in place, I believe, is a good one. They refer to a system of disarray and confusion and unrest throughout the college system. That doesn't exist. There are some faculty associations that want amendments to the legislation, which they know are under consideration, but that's the extent of it.
Thank you. Westlock Sturgeon, main question on behalf of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My main question today is to the Minister of Career Development and Manpower, Mr. Speaker. The federal manpower and employment. I'm sorry, employment. There's so little employment, I really made the mistake there on it. But the federal government, Mr. Speaker, has recently agreed to allow the provinces to guarantee investments of investor immigrants who qualify under the business immigration program. Mr. Speaker, of course, many people, even natives of this province, would love to get investment guarantees for them of their life savings. But anyhow, the government of Quebec, Mr. Speaker, has a program that will guarantee investments of up over $500,000, over $500,000, Mr. Speaker. My question to the minister is this: since they mentioned taking knives away in restaurants disturb the Minister of Transport?
Thank you, honourable member. Let's get to the question.
Government plan. My question, Minister, is: does this government plan to implement a program similar to that of the government of Quebec
Mr. Speaker, the business immigration program has been very good to Alberta. In 1986, it generated about $10 million to this province, and since we moved our office to Hong Kong, has generated $100 million for the province. And the bottom line is, Mr. Speaker, that it must create employment and it must invest in the risk side of the economy. Now, the business immigration program has been modified to some extent unilaterally by the federal government and includes a new provision that allows for collateral guarantees. We will be looking at it and examining it, whether or not it will be appropriate for Alberta.
Mr. Speaker, then if they're going to provide guarantees for these rich immigrants, bearing in mind that Alberta was built on the backs of poor immigrants, just what numbers was he thinking of in order to be competitive with Quebec?
Mr. Speaker, if the honourable member will recall my last answer, he is presuming that we will be participating in that program.
Mr. Speaker, then possibly the minister could tell us then what was the average investment per rich immigrant over the last year while the program has been under his supervision?
Mr. Speaker, I could go into great detail. There are, in fact, three categories: the self-employed, the entrepreneurial, and the investor category in the business immigration program. And within the investor category, there are three criteria, and it would be very difficult for me to say. I can say that up until the changes, the minimum investment in the investor category was $250,000 with a net worth of $500,000. On the entrepreneurial side, Mr. Speaker, it's far from that wealth is far from the main criterion in the entrepreneurial category. Experience as a businessman and an individual who can participate in the Alberta economy and create jobs is the bottom line.
Mr. Speaker, there's something disgusting about selling Canadian citizenships for money. Mr. Speaker, could the minister tell this House then whether or not this government guarantees investments for immigrants that come in with $200,000 or more? I'm sorry, a portion of it.
Mr. Speaker, I should make it clear to the honourable gentleman that there are no visas or passports being sold under the program. That the criterion is very strict, and it must create jobs in this province, and the investment must be in the risk side of the economy. I can assure the honourable gentleman that in Alberta, to date, there have been no provision for collateral guarantees. Now, I must indicate to the member that there has been a new category offered by the federal government, and for the third time, Mr. Speaker, we'll be examining that category and determining whether or not Alberta will participate in it.
Member for Little Bow, on behalf of the Representative Caucus.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Environment. I understand the Minister has recommendations for changes to the regulations under the Beverage Container Act before him. That act and regulations being very important to recycling, to keeping the roads clean, the environment in this province, and also supporting some 200 small businesses across the province. Could the Minister indicate what those recommendations are and when we may hear of the changes here in the Assembly?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member is absolutely correct. The honourable member will recall that in recent weeks there have been additional questions with respect to the Beverage Container Act in the province of Alberta. We do have a regulation that's due to come into effect on July 1, 1988. But over the last several months, we've created a roundtable, a discussion advisory roundtable to me that's made up of a series of players in the province of Alberta. And I met with them just recently on April 27, 1988, and the group made a series of recommendations to me with respect to changes. There were four, basically, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member asked the question, and I'm very happy to give him the four recommendations that were made to me. That there was unanimous agreement among all the members of this council, this roundtable council. The first one was that deposits must be separated from the prices of contents at the retail level. Secondly, the current voluntary handling charges being paid to the depots be included as mandatory handling charges. The third one is that all manufacturers who want their non-refillable containers sorted for one of the existing reclamation systems should pay an additional 0.5 cents per container for the extra sort. And fourthly, the implementation rules proposed and agreed upon by the Beverage Container Council and the Department of the Environment for the transition period must be acted on by the Department, and these transition rules must ensure that all beverage consumers are treated fairly by the refunding of the actual deposits paid. In addition to that, there were two other recommendations provided to me in which there was not...
Thank you, Honourable Member. Let's leave some room for supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, more clearly. Supplementary to the Minister, my concern is with regards to the payment for various beverage containers when they're taken to the depot. I understand that recommendations are that it will be only 2 cents for small bottles and some 5 cents for large bottles, which is a change from a range of 5 to 30 cents. Could the Minister indicate whether the Minister supports that recommendation, or will there be further consideration of a higher level of payment at the depots?
Just for clarity, Mr. Speaker, the payments that the honourable member is talking about are the tariffs that we have in the province of Alberta. In other words, the deposit tariff that a consumer, one who goes and purchases something, would pay in that deposit. And the recommendations provided to me is that the system we currently have in our province, which ranges from 2 cents to 30 cents, depending on the size of the container, is too complex and too complicated. And the recommendations provided to me basically say that these tariffs should be reduced, and the recommended level is from 2 cents to 10 cents per container. Now, that has absolutely nothing to do with the charge that a sorter, a member of an entrepreneur in the field, would be receiving for their sort. This is the tariff that we as consumers pay to ensure that we return these containers back to the bottle depot system.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary to the Minister, could the Minister indicate what studies there are in place or what information the Minister has with regards to whether a consumer will return the bottles or not at the 2 cent payment level?
Well, I'm informed consistently, Mr. Speaker, by all of the players who have come to me with respect to the recommendations, and they include the Alberta Bottle Depot Association, that experience throughout North America clearly indicates that consumers will return the bottles to the bottle depot system. All members should remember as well that Alberta is the only place anywhere that has a mandatory bottle retrieval system that includes a bottle depot system. No other province or state in America has a bona fide entrepreneurship system as we have in our province, with some 225 bottle depots in this province. We've now been in this business for some 15, 16 years with respect to it. The return rate for most of the containers we have in our province tends to be in the 90 to 95% level. It's a very, very well-received program in our province, and it's one that will continue to be received very favorably, I believe.
Speaker, final supplementary to the Minister. The program has worked well to this point in time because we've paid a fair amount for the bottles when returned. And my question is specifically to the small bottles, that the price that will be paid will be the 2 cents. Can the Minister indicate whether there's adequate information to assure us that our roads will stay clean and that consumers will bring those bottles back at 2 cents each? I doubt it myself.
Well, Mr. Speaker, there's no change in reducing anything from a higher level down to 2 cents. The 2 cents would remain the same under the proposal's recommendations provided to me. It would not be a case of reducing anything from 30 cents to 2 cents. The 2 cents item would remain as it is in effect. What in essence would change under the recommendations provided to me by all of the players in the industry in this province is that basically the 30-cent tariff that a consumer pays today is not the thing that would drive a consumer to returning and to be concerned about anti-littering and concerned about the protection and enhancement of our environment. I want to make it clear, though, as well, Mr. Speaker, that these are only recommendations provided to me at this point in time. I have not made a decision, and nor has the government.
Member for Edmonton Glengarry.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister mentioned the system of bottle depots. And in view of the restrictive nature of the conditions for setting up bottle depots in terms of distance between them and population, was there any consideration given to modifying those to allow for a little greater flexibility, say for creating a second bottle depot in a city like Sherwood Park, where they have a large trading area, although not the centralized population?
Mr. Speaker, that matter has been under review for about a year now. The entrepreneurs who are involved in the Bottle Depot Association in the province of Alberta are adamant, totally adamant that I We should not do such a thing. Remember, Mr. Speaker, that when we created the Beverage Container Act in this province, it was anti-litter legislation. It was to put up a system whereby people would be encouraged to return their bottles and containers to a system, an organized system throughout our province. So we set up a guideline that basically says that for each population of 25,000, I would allocate, as the Minister of the Environment, a licensee to operate in that particular locale. And in all other communities, there would be one per community. That, of course, is not private enterprise. That, of course, does not provide an opportunity for individuals to come to me and get licenses. I've asked the Bottle Depot Association if they would be prepared to see us open the system to allow more people involved in the Bottle Depot Association, and they've responded to me adamantly, no, because that will destroy the whole system. So I'm weighing both of them. On the one hand, we've got to protect our environment. On the other hand, we've got to make sure that if we move in a way that we're going to have a bottle depot in every corner, then ultimately we will have no bottle depots because none of them will be able to survive.
Okay. Main question, Dunvegan, followed by Edmonton Strathcona, Edmonton Gobar, Bow Valley, Calgary Mountain View, Athabasca Lac La Biche. Dunvegan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Westlock Sturgeon on a supplementary, but the chair is a bit concerned about the length of some of the questions and answers.
I'd like to ask the Minister of Environment that in view of the change in pricing from the glass area, and in view of the fact that he appears not to be interfering or stopping a 4-liter plastic milk bottle, is he contemplating, if the 4-liter plastic milk bottle comes in, some sort of a rebate with reference to the glass equivalent?
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's purely hypothetical, but there's one product that is exempt from the Beverage Container Act, and that is milk. We have determined in our province that milk is a food of life. It is incredibly important that we would not penalize the consumer or provide him with a disincentive into going out and purchasing milk, so there is no tariff. Milk is not part of the Beverage Container Act. We have no intention of bringing milk into and forming under anything under the Beverage Container Act.
Dunvegan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A couple of days ago, the federal government released results of fish samplings in Alberta, Saskatchewan, British Columbia, and New Brunswick. While the general conclusions from National Health and Welfare are that dioxins and furans in edible portions of fish do not constitute a health hazard, could the Minister of Environment provide this House with specific results for Alberta?
Mr. Speaker, on Monday this week, a statement was issued by the federal government, 3 ministers of the Crown, that basically indicated that in terms of their assessment of dioxins and furans in the country of Canada and the various assessments that have taken place, that in edible portions of fish samples that there were none that were considered to pose a health hazard to consumers. And a little earlier in the question period, I filed a document which covers the results of the testing that occurred in Alberta on both the Wapiti and the Athabasca rivers. And in both cases, there were 5 fish in each case sampled, 10 samples in all. And in all cases, the combined toxicity of the edible portion of the fish expressed in parts per trillion for one form of dioxin was beneath the level that Health and Welfare Canada and the United States Food and Drug Administration considered to be above a safe level.
Supplementary question. I look forward for that document that was tabled in the House earlier today. But a supplementary question to the Minister of the Environment, Mr. Speaker. It appears difficult to draw a scientific conclusion based on a one-time sampling. What assurances can the Minister give the House that samples will continue?
Well, Mr. Speaker, on previous occasions in this legislature, I indicated that Alberta Environment had also undertaken samples, and I've also indicated that those samples have been forwarded to Wright State University in the United States, and they have been forwarded, and they are being tested. We still do not have the results of those tests yet. When they do become available to us here in the province of Alberta, we will make them available in public. In addition to that, Mr. Speaker, I've indicated before that there is a national task force in the country of Canada looking at the impact of dioxins and furans. I've also tabled in this Assembly, Mr. Speaker, a copy of a document that the Canadian Council of Resource and Environment Ministers had published in 1987 in the country of Canada, and we, of course, view this as a very concerning, serious matter, and we will continue to address our energies towards a complete understanding of the impact of dioxins and furans in our environment.
Final supplementary, Mr. Speaker. What programs does the minister have in place to cut down on the amount of dioxins and furans which may be produced by the pulp and paper industry in Alberta, which will both ensure a healthy environment and a prosperous forest industry?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we've established as a principle for the governance of such mills in the province of Alberta that those mills should have something known as best achievable technology. And in terms of the applications for licenses that have come to us from Champion, from Miller Western, from Alberta North Newsprint, and Diashawa, we are going to be working in those particular areas. In the case of both Champion and Diashawa, of course, they're going to have sophisticated new equipment called oxygen delignification equipment in place.
Mr. Speaker, in view of the fact that in the U.S. they close rivers down that have in excess of 5 trillion parts dioxin per fish, and in the Wapiti we're getting up to 44 parts per trillion, how can the Minister of the Environment possibly say that we're not in any danger? Why will he not close down these rivers until we take some preventive action?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that the leader of the Liberal Party would want once again to avail himself of information, the correct information, and the correct information was tabled or filed in this Assembly a few minutes ago by myself. In the case of the Wapiti River, the combined toxicity levels of edible portion of fish expressed as parts per trillion for T378 TCDD, which is one of 75 types of dioxins, the most toxic one, the levels per trillion were 0.7 to 17.6 parts per trillion. I would like to point out, Mr. Speaker, that a 1 part per trillion is roughly the equivalent size of a grain of salt in an Olympic-sized swimming pool, or, to put it in another scenario, it's roughly the size of $1 bill hidden someplace in a landmass as great as the total geography of the country of Canada.
Edmonton Strathcona, followed by Edmonton Glengarry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Supplementary on this, the minister's made quite a big deal in the past about there not being protocols for testing dioxins, and so I see this with some amazement. I'm wondering if he could explain whether or not the same protocols were used in coming to the readings for the fish in these two rivers as were used for coming to the recommendations of the U.S. FDA and Health and Welfare, or did they use the Swedish protocols, which might be much better?
Well, there's a lot of suggestion in that question, Mr. Speaker, and when one says they might be quite better and the reality is they're not quite as good, of course, leaves the wrong impression. So I think for clarification that we would have to deal with that. There's no doubt at all in my mind, Mr. Speaker, that it's clear when I say there is not one internationally recognized protocol with respect to the measurement of dioxins. And there is not. There is not. There are guidelines that are used by other agencies throughout the world, and I've quoted 2 of them this afternoon, Mr. Speaker, in this question period. I've also pointed out that in previous question periods, what is extremely important is that everybody must agree on what the protocol is, so we're all speaking the same language, irrespective of where we live. Nothing can confuse people more than to say, well, here it means something, there it means something. To me, it must be definitive, it must be scientific, we must all agree in the world what it really means. When I tell a member that I love him, the word love means something. It doesn't have a different meaning for me as for a different meaning for him.
The whole topic is starting to boggle my imagination. May we now move on to Edmonton Strathcona, followed by Edmonton Gold Bar.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Culture. It concerns the Alberta Foundation for the Literary Arts. In his letter of the 21st April 1988 to the Foundation's chairman that announced a $500,000 grant to the Banff TV Foundation, he specified, Mr. Speaker, as follows: the Alberta Foundation for the Literary Arts will not be required to enter into discussion with the Banff Television Foundation on the uses of this money. The amount and how it is to be used will be the subject of discussion between the department and the Banff Television Foundation. My question to the Minister is, how does he square this with his mandate under the Act, which merely reads that he may give directions to a foundation for the purpose of A, providing priorities and guidelines for it, and B, of coordinating the work of the foundation so it doesn't duplicate with government or private institutions?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think that question has been asked on a number of occasions, and I've responded, and I'll respond again. When the announcements were made about the 5 foundations at that time and the 6 other lottery dollar recipients under the umbrella of culture and multiculturalism, 6 lottery recipients were provided lottery dollars this year under the foundations that now exist, including the Banff Television Festival, the Alberta Choral Federation, the Alberta Band Association, the Alberta Museums Association, and a number of other associations. They will continue to receive their lottery dollars, Mr. Speaker, but to reduce the bureaucracy and the administration, those dollars will flow through the 4 foundations.
Mr. Speaker, it may be convenient, but on the face of it, it looks illegal. And so my question is that concerning the other part of the letter accompanying the news of the $300,000 to film and video support, where the directions are every bit as specific and are as follows: this money should not be allocated in any way until further direction is received from the government. I've read the Minister the mandate. How possibly can he square such directions with the mandate?
The legal or illegal opinion.
Mr. Speaker, in the letter which the member is quoting from in part, and I'll be happy to file with the Assembly a complete copy of the letter so that we don't have dribbles and drabbles of it put out at the member's convenience. But I think it's important to notice that in the letter that has been released to the Chairman and discussed by the Board, that monies are provided to publishers, to provincial service organizations, to writers' grants, and film and video support. And as I mentioned yesterday, or I believe the other day, Mr. Speaker, to write first a script. To write or edit a script is essential for video or film or commercials in those areas.
Order, please. The chair would indeed like to have a copy of this letter filed for the House from someone that... Thank you.
Mr. Speaker. I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, I don't seem to be able to get through to this minister. I'm talking about the terms of the grant of $800,000 and whether it's within the Act. The minister says in his letter nothing about confining the $800,000 to script writing, which, being a literary exercise, is the only thing that would bring the grant within his powers. $800,000 for audio and TV scripts is a 7,000% increase over the amount...
Thank you, Honourable Member, but let's have the question. We had it... Order, please. We also had this matter on May the 16th, so let's get to the question.
With respect, we didn't, Mr. Speaker, but in the last 2 years of record, will the minister either explain this sudden and astonishing golden shower upon hitherto lowly and unsung TV and audio scriptwriters in this province, or admit that he has been as suddenly and as astonishingly exercising beyond his powers?
Mr. Speaker, I have just handed to the page a copy of the letter, so it is filed with the Assembly. Mr. Speaker, the $500,000 allotment to the Banff Television Festival, as I mentioned earlier, is to a television festival. It is continuing a program of 9 years. This program is world-renowned, and Banff's Television Festival is now either the second or the third of its kind in the world. The other $300,000, Mr. Speaker, is under discussion by the department, and when the department and the industry and the people involved are comfortable with the option of this $300,000 for film and script and video writing, that money will be made available through the foundation. They will determine the recipients, not the government, as they do in all of the other categories.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, it does seem he is confirming to us that it's all for script writing. And, Mr. Speaker, as noticed, the minister in his letter attempts, yes, it's coming, attempts to forbid the Foundation from consulting with the objects of its enforced munificence. One of them in the minister's own constituency, as we know. Is the minister afraid
Thank you,
that the...
All right, if we're at the question.
This is the question. Is the minister afraid that the Foundation will discover what is undoubtedly the truth, that the greatest part of this grant of aid...
Thank you, honourable member. This question has been going at great length. And you really must frame the question much more succinctly in these supplementals. There are still 6 other members who wanted to get into question period, and it's supposed to finish at 3:23. All you want, sir.
That the greatest part of it, the 800,000, is not for script writing, but is illegal.
That's an opinion, Mr. Speaker.
The previous question, additional supplementaries, Edmonton Goldbar.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Will the minister undertake to file with the House the letters to all of the other foundations funded by lottery money, along with the correspondence related to the Literary Foundation?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'd be pleased to do that.
Thank you. Cloverbar.
Supplementary question to the minister. Can the minister indicate, is this not an ongoing festival that has been going on for quite some time?
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate that question. It's the 9th year this year of this festival. And I beg your pardon, if you want to interrupt, I'm a culture critic. I hope to be the culture supporter. This is the 9th year of festivals of this type, and it is now one that is known throughout the world, and award winners are receiving awards from South America, North America, and Europe, and Australia, and Asia.
Edmonton Goldbar.
Mr. Speaker, in 1986, this government established the Alberta Advisory Council on Women's Issues. The purpose of the council is to identify and make recommendations to the government on matters of importance to women. The council recently has come under attack for inadequate representation of women's issues to government. Perhaps, Mr. Speaker, the focus should more properly be on the unresponsive government. To the minister responsible for women's issues, despite the council's recommendations on quality daycare, family violence, pay equity, we have yet to see this minister respond with any action. Can the minister outline a concrete plan of action following from these recommendations? Are they accepted, rejected? What's going to happen?
Mr. Speaker, I would be pleased to share with the member for Edmonton Cloverbar the government's coordinated response to the Women's Gold Bar with apologies.
Gold in the clover.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if the member from Gold Bar would move a little further to the right into Clover Bar, I think we'd all be happier. As I was saying, the Women's Council did put together some recommendations, all of which had emerged from a public meeting in Calgary last March, and the recommendations to government were received in the fall, and in short order the government had a coordinated response to the Council in which we outlined our agreement with some and our studying of other issues which they raised.
Time for question period has expired. May we have unanimous consent to complete this series of questions? Opposed? Edmonton Goldbar.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, farther to the right if I'm facing the north, but otherwise not. Mr. Speaker, will the minister consider amending the Council's enacting legislation so that it will report directly to the legislature rather than to the minister, and thus is given some independence?
Mr. Speaker, the Council is an advisory council, and it has got independence. It has control over the budget, which, of course, this legislature allocates to it, and it is then free to set the priorities on the issues that it wishes to raise with the government. It is an advisory council through the minister responsible for women's issues to Executive Council, which gives it a good focus and a good forum in which to put its views, as you might imagine. I do want to say this. The member had raised questions of daycare and pay equity, and when would this minister be responding with activities and programs? I want to remind the Assembly that the responsibilities for women's issues is more that of an advocate and a catalyst. The responsibility for programs and policy implementation are with each of the ministers responsible for those areas. As in daycare, it is the Minister of Social Services, and any employment strategies are of course, with the Ministers of Labour and Career Development and Employment. And so those ministers may wish to supplement my answers.
Mr. Speaker, that's precisely the point. I think we need to know how the minister is operating as an advocate with her colleagues. Mr. Speaker, has the minister asked the Council for comments on Bill 21, the Employment Standards Code, which of course does gravely affect women, and to discuss and transfer on to her colleague, the Minister of Labour?
The answer to the first comment, how do I advocate with my colleagues, again, perhaps that might be better put to my colleagues. I can assure the member that I have been a most active and vocal and sometimes I suspect irritating advocate for women's issues among many of my colleagues. The answer to the question as to whether I have directly asked the Council for a reading on Bill 21, the answer is no.
Well, I would hope that that situation is corrected immediately, Mr. Speaker. Has the minister, or will the minister, then ask the Women's Advisory Council for comments or advice on the potential exploitation of immigrant women in the labour force? Is it happening? How can we correct? This is a matter that has most recently been before the House.
It's certainly a question of great importance, the question of the working conditions of immigrant women in Alberta. And as the member knows, the minister responsible, the Minister for Career Development and Employment, has in fact put a committee on to that question to find out the facts. As to the Women's Council making comments either on the labour legislation that is currently in front of this House or on the specific question that the member has raised, I would remind her that the Council is an independent body and has therefore the independence to set its own priorities and to bring that advice forward to us as it sees fit.
Edmonton Avonmore, supplementary.
To the Minister, inasmuch as the Council has not addressed these issues, will the Minister herself commit herself to consulting with the ministers responsible for Bill 21 in order to ensure that there will be benefits and job security attributed to part-time workers who are in the most part women?
Mr. Speaker, I can definitely give that assurance, particularly since the Minister of Labour and I have had discussions on that subject already.
Time for question period has expired. Edmonton Highlands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The point of order that I wanted to raise has to do with your interventions today in question period during questions that were being asked by my colleague, the member for Edmonton Strathcona. I've been through the rules on a couple of occasions and never been able to find any reference to punishment or provision which says that compound sentence structures, whether in the preamble or in the actual question, should be prohibited, and which specifies that subjunctive clauses and subordinate clauses are not allowed. And I wonder, Mr. Speaker, why it is that when in the middle of a question particularly, and I know because I found myself in this situation, being called to order is deemed appropriate, given that the indications of the question are already made clear by the use of certain words, certain indications that a question is already approaching. It just happens to be framed in a compound sentence structure. And I think my objection, Mr. Speaker, is that for those people who are inclined to use more complex sentence structure, it seems wrong to penalize them right in the middle of their question when in fact a call to order might be more appropriate if someone has gone to, say, his fifth preamble, which I happen to know is not characteristic of the member for Edmonton Strathcona. No, that's quite true. If you look at Hansard, you'll see that he is able to craft his sentences carefully, and where commas and semicolons would ordinarily show up in Hansard, I think that it should be understood that those are not meant to be periods, which constitutes, the stop of one sentence and the commencement of another. Now, I've talked to the chair before about the issue of not being allowed to ask questions on the same broad subject matter, and it seems to me that if the issue is demonstrably different in its angle, in the perspective that it is pursuing, that also must not be an issue when it comes to calling to order by the chair, and I wonder if the Speaker would take these observations into account.
On the same point of order, I'd refer to Beauchesne, section 359, sub 1 and 2, where sub 1 says it must be a question, not an expression of opinion, representation, argumentation, nor debate. And I would submit, Mr. Speaker, that we have had sentences that are filled with conjunctions which manage to include a good variety of all of those things that they're not supposed to include. It's quite possible to use and then and therefore, etc., and go on for 3 minutes, and I believe that some of the preambles are very close to achieving that. But, Mr. Speaker, that is quite inconsistent with 359 sub 2, which starts off by saying succinctly, the question must be brief. And, Mr. Speaker, the questioner, Mr. Speaker, I'm challenged about the response, and the questioner, of course, lives with the response if the questioner chooses to ask the particular question and ask it in an argumentative, debating, challenging, or misrepresenting manner, and that occasionally happens. Mr. Speaker, accordingly, I submit that there is no point of order. There is simply a complaint, and that, Mr. Speaker, the rulings that you have made have been quite consistent.
Over. Bar.
Mr. Speaker, you can find out what section it's in, but I'm just finding, Mr. Speaker, that I think we all are guilty, Mr. Speaker, because from the many years that I've been in this Assembly, the rules have been very, very tough as to the length of questions and the preambles. And, Mr. Speaker, in speaking to all the members of the Assembly, the preambles seem to be getting longer, the supplementaries seem to be getting longer, and, Mr. Speaker, what we're doing is we're all defeating the purposes of the question period if we allow this to keep going.
The issue as raised is one which is indeed covered in Beauchesne 371, whereby the chair does indeed have the authority. The extent to which supplementary questions may be asked is in the discretion of the Speaker. 371, and that's the authority that's for it, at which the chair intervenes. The chair will continue to intervene because, as mentioned by the member for Clover Bar, the practice of this House is developing that it's getting longer and longer and longer to get a question out, and that one also does comment that some ministers in particular do tend to take longer and longer to answer the question. But nevertheless, at least the House Leader of one political party has come to me complaining that there aren't enough questions from that party being able to get into the House. The chair has been trying to speed up the process so that more questions can be asked. And so when the chair then intervenes to try to promote the process, the chair is not terribly thrilled then to be sort of given a little bit of a gentle nudge that the chair is not doing its job in the correct form. But indeed, when it comes to supplementary questions in particular, they're getting too long and Too many members are then going on and trying to cram in a second and a third question on what is supposed to be one supplementary issue. And more when this happens, when two questions are being asked as a supplementary, the chair will give direction to the minister to answer the first question but not the second. Let's get on to it. And in terms of the other thing that occurred with the questions between Edmonton, Strathcona, and the Minister of Culture and Multiculturalism, of the four questions, you'll find that at least one of them was repeated on one of the supplementaries. But the real matter here is let's get the questions out, let's get the answers